The Tale of Little Red Riding Hood, a woodland adventure. Hello, dreamers! Welcome back to Dandelion Daydreams. Today, we're exploring a classic fairy tale filled with mystery, bravery, and a very tricky wolf. That's right, it's the story of Little Red Riding Hood. So get comfy and let's step into this magical woodland adventure. Once upon a time, in a quiet little village, there lived a kind and cheerful girl who was loved by everyone. She always wore a bright red hooded cloak that her grandmother had made for her, so everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One sunny morning, Little Red Riding Hood's mother asked her to take a basket of treats to her grandmother, who lived deep in the forest. "Remember, dear," her mother said, "stay on the path and don't talk to strangers." Little Red Riding Hood promised to be careful and set off on her journey, humming a happy tune. As she walked through the forest, the sunlight danced through the trees, and she couldn't help but admire the beauty around her. Birds sang, flowers bloomed, and squirrels scampered about. But Little Red Riding Hood wasn't alone. A sly wolf, lurking in the shadows, watched her every move. The wolf, curious about the basket and Little Red Riding Hood's destination, stepped out onto the path. "Good morning, little girl," he said with a toothy grin. "Where are you off to on this fine day?" Remembering her mother's warning, Little Red Riding Hood hesitated, but she decided it was only polite to answer. "I'm going to my grandmother's house to bring her some treats," she said. The wolf's eyes gleamed with mischief. "What a thoughtful girl you are," he said. "And where does your grandmother live?" Little Red Riding Hood pointed down the path. "At the end of the forest, in a little cottage with a thatched roof." The wolf nodded and said, "Why not pick some flowers for her on your way? I'm sure she'd love that." Then he disappeared into the woods. Little Red Riding Hood thought it was a wonderful idea and began gathering colorful flowers. Meanwhile, the wolf, as cunning as ever, raced ahead to the grandmother's cottage. He knocked on the door and, disguising his voice, called out, "It's me, grandmother! Little Red Riding Hood!" The kind old woman opened the door, but before she could greet her visitor, the wolf leapt inside. "Don't worry," he said with a smirk. "I've got big plans for you." He locked her in the wardrobe, put on her nightgown and cap, and climbed into her bed, waiting for Little Red Riding Hood to arrive. Back in the forest, Little Red Riding Hood had gathered a beautiful bouquet of flowers and continued on her way. When she reached her grandmother's cottage, she found the door slightly open. "Grandmother?" she called as she stepped inside. The room was dim, and the figure in the bed didn't look quite like her grandmother. "Come closer, my dear," the wolf said, trying to sound like an old woman. Little Red Riding Hood hesitated, but she approached the bed. "Grandmother," she said, "what big ears you have." The wolf grinned. "All the better to hear you with, my dear." "And grandmother," she continued, "what big eyes you have." "All the better to see you with, my dear," the wolf replied. Finally, Little Red Riding Hood said, "Grandmother, what big teeth you have." The wolf couldn't hold back any longer. "All the better to eat you with," he roared, leaping out of bed. Little Red Riding Hood screamed and ran, but just as the wolf was about to catch her, a woodcutter passing by heard her cries. The brave woodcutter burst into the cottage with his axe. He chased the wolf away, sending him running deep into the forest, never to return. Little Red Riding Hood quickly freed her grandmother from the wardrobe, and they hugged tightly, relieved to be safe. Grateful for the woodcutter's help, Little Red Riding Hood promised to always be cautious and never stray from the path again. She and her grandmother enjoyed the treats from the basket, laughing and talking about the adventure. And so, Little Red Riding Hood learned an important lesson. It's always wise to listen to your mother and to be careful in the woods. From that day on, she and her grandmother lived happily, their bond even stronger than before. And that, dreamers, is the tale of Little Red Riding Hood, a story of bravery, quick thinking, and a little help from a kind stranger. If you enjoyed this adventure, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more magical tales from Dandelion Daydreams. Keep dreaming, dreamers, and we'll see you in the next adventure.